What happened to the most powerful tribe in the world? Do you know about this tribe? No, it's not the Jewish tribe. It is the Thamud tribe. Welcome back, everyone. Today we will talk about one of the most powerful tribes in the world that vanished into thin air. So without any further ado, let's get started. If you think the Jews are the most powerful tribe in the world, think again, because there is one tribe that is more powerful than them. This tribe has made a big impact on our world. Their impact can be seen in the Middle East and even parts of Europe. Yet many of us don't know much about them. If you want to know who they are, then you need to listen up carefully. The tribe we're talking about is called the Sumerians. They are an ancient Mesopotamian civilization that lived in the lower Euphrates River in what is now Iraq. The exact timeline of their existence is unknown, but most historians believe that they emerged around 3500 BC. They were living during a time when other civilizations were just beginning to emerge. For example, the civilization in ancient Egypt was only 2,500 years old when the Sumerians had already been flourishing for 700 years. The Sumerians dominated Mesopotamia for over 1,800 years, which is way longer than almost all the civilizations of that time. In fact, no other civilization came close to the Sumerians in terms of how long they lasted. Even the Egyptians only lasted half as long as the Sumerians. The Sumerians were also pioneers. They introduced many things to the world that we take for granted today, and if it wasn't for them, the world would be a very different place today. Let me tell you why. The Sumerians are considered the first civilization in history to have reached a high level of societal organization. They developed the world's first cities, the first complex political systems, including the world's first empire and many other important innovations. Before the Sumerians, people lived in small villages and had no concept of things like government or infrastructure. But the Sumerians changed all of that. They built the first great cities in history, such as Ur, Uruk, and Lagash. These cities were not just centers of trade and commerce, but also of culture and learning. The Sumerians kept detailed records of their history and accomplishments, which helped later civilizations to learn from their example. But perhaps the most important contribution of the Sumerians was their development of writing. Before the Sumerians, humans had used pictures and symbols to communicate, but the Sumerians developed a system of cuneiform writing, which used wedge-shaped marks to represent words. This allowed them to keep detailed records of their history and accomplishments, which helped later civilizations to learn from their example. Now, you must be thinking to yourself, wow, these guys were really advanced for their time. But where did they go? Why don't we hear about them anymore? And the answer to that question is quite simple. To put it simply, the Sumerians disappeared completely from the face of the earth. Nobody knows exactly what happened to them. Some historians believe that they were wiped out by a natural disaster such as a flood or an earthquake. Others believe that they were conquered by neighboring civilizations such as the Akkadians or the Babylonians. However, there is no evidence to support any of these theories, and the mystery of the Sumerians' disappearance remains unsolved. But wait, before you go ahead and start blaming climate change on the Sumerians' disappearance, let me tell you something. Climate change was not responsible for the Sumerians' disappearance. There is no evidence that the climate in Mesopotamia changed drastically during the Sumerians' decline. In fact, the region continued to be fertile and prosperous even after the Sumerians disappeared. Instead, it was most likely a combination of factors that led to the Sumerians' downfall, such as environmental degradation, overpopulation, and pressure from neighboring civilizations. Many scholars believe that the Sumerians' mastery of irrigation and their ability to control the flow of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers may have led to environmental degradation. Over time, this may have led to soil erosion, salination, and a decline in agricultural productivity. Finally, pressure from neighboring civilizations such as the Akkadians and Babylonians may have contributed to the Sumerians' decline. But here's the thing, the Sumerians weren't completely wiped out. Their culture and achievements lived on through the empires that came after them, such as the Babylonians and the Assyrians. The Babylonians, who ruled Mesopotamia from the 18th to the 6th century BC, adopted many aspects of Sumerian culture, including their religion and their writing system. Similarly, the Assyrians, who ruled from the 9th to the 7th century BC, also adopted many Sumerian customs. In fact, the Assyrians were known for their brutality and military might. They conquered the Sumerians and many other civilizations throughout the Near East. But despite their warlike nature, they too adopted many Sumerian customs. In fact, the Assyrians were so influenced by the Sumerians that they even adopted their gods. The Assyrians were polytheistic, and they worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses. But their main god, Assur, was actually a Sumerian deity who was originally the patron god of the city of Akkad. Over time, Assur became the supreme god of the Assyrian Empire, and he was worshipped throughout their domain. But while the Sumerians may have influenced the cultures of the empires that came after them, the same cannot be said for their bloodline. The Sumerians were a distinct race of people with their own language and customs, and as we've already discussed, they eventually disappeared from the face of the earth. However, there is a theory that suggests that the Sumerians may have actually assimilated into the population. This theory is based on the fact that there is no archaeological evidence of a massive extinction event that would have wiped out the Sumerians. Furthermore, the Sumerians' cultural influence continued even after they disappeared, suggesting that they may have simply blended into the surrounding populations. Proponents of this theory argue that the Sumerians' language and customs were so influential that they continued to be used even after the Sumerians themselves were gone. But regardless of what happened to their bloodline, the Sumerians left behind a legacy that would shape the course of human history. Their innovations in science, mathematics, and agriculture helped to lay the foundation for the development of civilization in Mesopotamia and beyond. Their influence can still be seen in the cultures and traditions of the people who live in the region today. Today, parts of the ancient Sumerian Empire are located in modern-day Iraq, Kuwait, and Turkey. The region is home to a variety of ethnic groups, including Kurds, Turks, and Arabs. But the people who live in the region today are not direct descendants of the Sumerians. Rather, they are the descendants of the empires that came after the Sumerians, such as the Babylonians and the Assyrians. Despite this, the influence of the Sumerians can still be seen in the region today. For example, the Sumerian language is still spoken by some people in the region, and many of the traditional crafts and customs are rooted in Sumerian culture. So, while we may never know exactly what happened to the Sumerians, their legacy lives on in the region they once called home. Now, before we move on, please take some time to subscribe to my channel. It would mean a lot to me if you supported my work. Also, I'd like to ask you for a favor. Please share your thoughts on what happened to the Sumerians in the comments section below. We could all benefit from your insights. The Sumerians were not the only ones who tried to build an empire in the Fertile Crescent. Another group of people who attempted to do so were the Canaanites. They were a group of people who lived in Canaan, which is now Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. They were closely related to the Sumerians, and they shared many cultural similarities. However, unlike the Sumerians, the Canaanites were able to maintain their independence, and they were never conquered by an outside power. The Canaanites were a maritime people, and they were able to use their control of the seas to protect their homeland from invaders. They were also skilled traders, and they were able to use their wealth to build a powerful army. As a result, the Canaanites were able to resist the attempts of the Sumerians and other Mesopotamian empires to conquer them. But it wasn't just the Canaanites who resisted the Sumerians. There were other groups of people in the region who were able to resist the Sumerians as well. One of these groups was the Amorites. The Amorites were a nomadic people who lived in the northern part of Mesopotamia. Like the Canaanites, they were able to resist the Sumerians and other Mesopotamian empires. The Amorites were fierce warriors, and they were able to use their skills in horsemanship and archery to defeat their enemies. They were also able to take advantage of the rugged terrain of their homeland to protect themselves from invaders. The Sumerians were able to build a mighty empire, but it was not without its challenges. They faced resistance from the Canaanites, the Amorites, and other groups of people in the region. But despite these challenges, the Sumerians were able to build a vast and powerful empire that would have a lasting impact on the course of human history. The Sumerians' ability to build a mighty empire despite facing resistance from other groups in the region is a testament to their strength and resilience. They were able to adapt to the challenges they faced, and they were able to use their resources wisely to build a powerful state. As a result, the Sumerians were able to leave behind a legacy that would last for centuries.